Welcome to Book and Lounge. I'm your host, Jacqueline. In this episode, we are discussing Friday Black, a surreal and heartbreaking satire by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. The short story collection reveals some of the violence, injustice, and painful treatment that Black people contend with in everyday America. Friday Black was shortlisted for the 2019 Dylan Thomas Prize and won the Penn Gene Stein Book Award. I'm joined by Annette, Katrina, and Taiwo to discuss this piercing debut collection. Let's hear what they had to say about the book. Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hiya. And so, Friday Black is a collection of short stories written by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, which I have probably butchered because I'm not Ghanaian. But
You did a good job.
Oh, thank you. Right? Yeah, so it's a collection of short stories that I would say a bit supernatural, a bit dystopian, a bit out of this world. And they deal with a whole lot of issues, which we are hopefully going to discuss in a few moments. And I like this book because it's very different. It's not like anything else I've read. And I like it also because it made me think. And I just wondered, what do you guys think of it, first of all? Taiwo,
It's made me reconsider, to be honest. I
reconsider.
mean, because when we read the book, I disliked it quite intensely. But now, the reasons that you've given for why you actually liked it, I realize that, you know, the opposite of hate is love. I wouldn't say I love the book, but I'm beginning to understand that I had a strong reaction to it, a strong dislike of the book. And the reason I dislike it probably is because in many ways, it seems as if, or it seems to me as if the way I've read it or interpreted it, the future seems quite bleak in most of the stories. And most of the stories are quite dystopian. And that's what I didn't like about it. I mean, I enjoyed the creativity, but the content, it just really wasn't my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
But in some other ways, I really do like it because it's quite original. It's something new, it's something fresh, it's something unusual. So I'm kind of on the horns of a dilemma about whether I really like it, whether I hate it. And maybe it's an equal measure.
Well, that's the sign of a good book, isn't it?
I like to like my books.
Sorry?
I like to like my books, and I disliked this book.
Okay. And Annette, what do you think of it?
I still love it. I think I don't know if this is the only book I've given 5 stars for so far this year, but I loved it. When I was rereading some of the stories again, I loved it even more. I kind of liked it for the reasons you probably didn't initially, Taiwo. Like, it's bleak, but it has to come from somewhere. He didn't just kind of, obviously he uses imagination, but it has to come from somewhere. And the things that are happening right now, it's kind of exaggerated, but it's still very real in a different way. And so, yeah, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. It's I'm not lying, it is disturbing, some of the stories, but I think it's very different. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it.
Cool. So contrasting views.
But at the same time, Annette, when you said that it's exaggerated, to be honest, a lot of the exaggeration, apart from things maybe like Light Spitter, where it's talking about maybe hundreds of years in the future or something like that, many of them seem to be in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
And many of them, even if they're exaggerated or hyperbolic, they're very believable. You kind of think, you know, this could really happen.
Yeah, it's scary to think that.
Future.
Yeah.
And that's maybe part of the reason why I didn't like it, because I was thinking, where's the hope?
But is it that this could really happen though, or actually this is happening? It's just a bit exaggerated.
Deliberately so, yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking that I was as I was reading, I'm like, well, these are kind of things that happen. It's just he's just exaggerated some of it a bit, but I mean things like the people selecting children. You have countries where people select the kind of children that they want. It is already happening. So yes, I see what you mean, Taiwo, about there being no hope in the future. But I mean, it's a wake up call, isn't it?
Yeah, but are we ever going to wake up though?
Well, so from the first story, Nana Brenyah punches you in the face and leaves you in complete shock throughout the remaining 11 stories. How do we think he does this?
I found the first story quite shocking, to be honest. And if I wasn't a member of the book club, and therefore obligated, I guess, to a large extent to finish the book, I may have stopped reading it after the first story because I really disliked it. It really left a bad taste in my mouth, that first story. I thought maybe if he put it as a last story, it would have been more bearable for me. If it eased me into his bleak dystopian view of the world, that might have helped me. But
do you not
for me, that was the worst story.
You think it's the worst
Only in
story?
terms of content. Only in terms of content.
I think there were worse, so I don't mind if you started off with that one. I mean, it was definitely like it did shock you, and it was like a punch, but there's even far more. There's one particular one I find very disturbing in the book, which I think is even far more worse. And so,
Which one? Himmerland.
No, that is also disturbing. It's Lark Street, which I did not enjoy at all.
I loved Lark Street. That's my favourite story.
Like Lark Street at all. In fact, I when I tried reading it again, I couldn't. I just could not. It just grossed me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really did.
Wow. Do you think it's a gender thing?
Sorry?
Do you think it's a gender thing?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I'm not grossed out easily, but that was very gross. It was because the way he wrote it was it's so vivid. It just made me very uncomfortable, partly because I still don't know what he was trying to say. So I was just like, why am I reading this? There were a few things I had in mind as to why he was trying to say it, but yeah, I get what he might have been trying to say in the first story, but there's other bits in the book where I'm a bit confused. So that's why I didn't mind him starting off with that, because he was making a point, whereas the other parts, other stories, I wasn't entirely sure.
It's with Lark Street. I think the reason as to why I really struggled with it, and especially at the end, I just thought that he was passing judgment. I think it's the only where I felt that he was actually passing judgment, and I didn't feel that as a man he had the right to be holding those views.
When you say passing judgment, though, what do you mean?
He was. I think I was just in denial of him passing judgment, but he did sound like he was, not that there's any problem with being pro-life, but he did, yeah.
So for me, the way I saw it, he was like saying, well, actually what you did is wrong and you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
By bringing the characters back to life. I think that's what he was saying. And so because of that, I didn't like it the first time, and then the second time tried reading it, I just couldn't read it because I knew, number one, I knew where he was going from reading it the first time, but the second time is because it was just so gross. I did not want to read it again.
Wow, you guys went deep. I think I just read it as
you're a man.
I think I read it on a more superficial level.
Katrina, we're talking about
Lark Street, isn't it? You're talking about, yes. Finally, I don't know why I did, but in the end, something worked.
Well, that's good.
Yes, indeed. I gather I got the last little bit you were saying. I just thought it was like meant to make you think about it. Mm-hmm. And the boy, the young man, he sort of had a bit of a conscience about it. And I thought it was interesting in the sense that usually we talk a lot about the psychological effects on the woman. Mm-hmm. If you have a termination, well, that's what I think people talk about. And it's not very often that anyone considers, the male side of it, unless maybe it's a husband and wife or something. But like a young man, as a young couple, I don't think I've heard that sort of discussed. So I thought maybe that's another aspect to it.
Mm. It certainly is. I mean, we are getting it from both perspectives. And sorry,
go on. No, I just felt the way in which he characterized the young man as very ambivalent about the whole thing. He wants to provide support, but at the same time, he doesn't want to really bear the responsibility of being a father. But he wants to have the good times of having sex with his partner. So he's kind of conflicted, although at the same time he's gently pushing her down a particular path. But at the same time, I love the way in which, the way it began and the way it ended. It made me think, because, you know, the first sentence, an impossible hand punched my earlobe. An unborn fetus aborted the day before was standing at my bedside. His name was Jackie Gunner. So it starts making me think, okay, is he imagining this? Is this all going on in his mind? Or is he having a breakdown? But then when it ends, he says, at home, I fell asleep on a pillow stained with blood. And I think, okay, did it really happen? Because towards the end, he brought in his partner, as in she's in this thing with him where she's scooping up one of the fetuses, the girl fetus who had already killed the boy. So there's so many kind of layers to the whole thing, you know, in terms of abortion. Is it right? Is it wrong? Does a fetus have rights? Do the mother's rights over her body and her future trump the right to life of the fetus? Is the fetus a human being? And also the fact that they're twins as well. I really related to that because it's the boy and the girl. The boy twin is bullying the girl twin then kills the boy. It's just so layered. I just felt it was just so creative, so well done. But I didn't go to that level that you guys went to.
Yeah, I think
Well,
it's the tone.
sorry. I
Okay.
was just thinking when you're talking, sorry, I'm interrupting, but that, of course, this is a very American book. To me, it's a very American book anyway. And a lot of what they talk about, I don't really relate to very well. But of course, abortion is a much bigger story in America, isn't it, than here, really? So
Yes.
again, I guess that's relevant to the story.
And also the whole thing with the abortion, you know, pro-life, pro-abortion, or whatever the opposite one is. And the fact that in America, it being a society that is just steeped in violence and guns, where it's quite normal to carry a gun. People have been killed at abortion clinics. You know, medical practitioners that carry out abortions have been shot and, you know, killed. So you have these very extreme emotions, very extreme camps on the issue of abortion, unlike in many other countries, like, for example, the United Kingdom. Passions may be aroused, but at the same time, it's very unlikely you're going to get shot because you're pro-life or pro-choice. Whereas America, everything's up for grabs.
I was just going to say, coming back, you mentioned people being shot and the issue of guns. I mean, we did have quite a lot of violence in the book. I mean, you have a story where there's a school shooting. And then you have the story where people are fighting in the shopping mall on Black Friday. So there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of blood within the book, but the stories themselves, although they are dystopian and supernatural, they still talk very much about the world as we know it today. And I think we mentioned that earlier. And I just wondered how you think the author achieves this by writing this really dystopian, gross, disturbing book, but actually setting it in a scene that we can still identify with it and can still actually see those things happening. Anybody?
Repeat the question.
Yes. No, I was just wondering, you know, how does the author, he writes a book that's very futuristic and dystopian in nature, right? But as I think you mentioned earlier, Taiwo, that you still can see those things happening and you can still actually place it today in today's world. And I just wondered, how does the author, in writing the book, how does he achieve that?
I didn't think Lark Street was particularly futuristic. I thought it could be now because either the young man is dreaming or there's some sort of, I don't know, you know what, but the sort of ideas he's expressing and he's talking about, I don't see those particularly futuristic at all.
Well, you have stories like Light Splitter.
And some of the others, yes.
Yeah, sure. Like the
Through the Flash.
Yeah, Through the Flash. That is very, I would say, very futuristic. And then the era as well, where you take good to feel good.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're talking about everything. I thought you were talking about Lark Street.
No. I was actually talking about all of them.
I don't know. I also feel like some of them could be, if, I don't know, I think obviously there are controls into some things that we can do in society. From far as I know, like, for example, gender selection, is that legal or not? It's not. So I do think, even for example, Zimmerland, I genuinely think if we were allowed to do that, it would happen. I think a lot of the things in there is if we were just given more, I don't mean it in a good way, but if more freedom was allowed for things to happen, then it would actually happen. I can't imagine that being a thing. I'm sure someone's thought of it. It's just not allowed to happen. But if it was, then it could. So it could get there in the future. That's why I don't think it's that far off. There are controls in place.
How about
have you already talked about Zimmerland?
No, not yet. Carry on, sorry. Carry on. What do you want to say about Zimmerland?
No, I was just thinking, it is about Zimmerland, but a lot of it's just an exaggeration of where we are today, isn't it? Because Zimmerland, to me, it's a little bit like paintballing. It's a little bit like video games. You can sort of see parallels. And Black Friday, well, of course,
exactly.
We're not far off that, are we?
People have died. I've seen people have been like trampled on. It's happened. I'm sure again, if people were knowing that there'll be no consequences as to what you could do to somebody if you needed something going in on a Black Friday, people would go even like just crazier than they already do. I just think we're bound by certain rules and laws as to why some of this stuff just hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm. I guess with Black Friday, it's consumerism taken to the extreme, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the thing with Zimmerland, it made me think very much of, I think it's Japanese anime, where they have this thing to do with schoolgirls and prepubescent schoolgirls and sex. And the argument being made in Zimmerland about you can get rid of your racist aggression safely through this role-playing process. And it helps you, or it helps prevent a person going out with a gun and killing for no good reason a young black man by playing in Zimmerland. It's the same argument that I've heard, or well, not heard, same argument that I've read in articles when they talk about the whole sexualized anime where Japanese men of a certain age are into the whole schoolgirl thing, and they role play or do various things to get rid of this sexual energy, which means that they therefore don't go and pester schoolgirls. And it's one of those kind of specious arguments that makes you think people want to do certain things, but they want to find a way to justify why they want to do those things. Instead of addressing the issue, you kind of twist it around and say, this is a justification for, I don't know, am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was gonna, I guess, add to that rather than in Zimmerland, rather than addressing the issues, they're just putting like a coat over it by creating this theme park where they can go and let out their aggression, rather than dealing with the issue as to why are they aggressive towards black people. Why do they feel that they need to shoot a black person? Rather than dealing with that, by providing them that avenue where they can just go and, I don't know, shoot a black person if they want. I see that as just covering over the cracks rather than actually dealing with the real issue. And
and do you think it might actually encourage it rather than diminish it?
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah.
Because
it's like scratching an itch, isn't it? The itch doesn't go away just because you scratched it.
I mean, towards the end, they've opened it up to children. So what are you actually teaching children by from a very early age, telling them that actually you can do this? Yes, it's a simulated situation, but it's okay for you to do. So with children, surely what we should be doing is saying that this is wrong from a young age and teaching them from a young age that it's wrong, rather than, oh yeah, you can go and shoot a black person.
But when you think about the issue of consumerism and the whole need for a new, a fresh market, I mean, there's every reason, isn't there, why you'd need to open it up to the next generation, because you've got this kind of it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You've got this whole new generation, this new market of people that are going to get hooked into it. It's a bit like porn, I guess, and other forms of addiction.
Mhm.
You know, get them young, and then they're yours forever.
Exactly. And I think the book has a lot of things to say about consumerism, doesn't it?
A lot.
Definitely.
You have that, and then you have the three. I think there are three stories, all of them relating to working in shopping centers and the exploitation of young people who work in shopping centers, and really a description of the kind of people that come into these shopping centers. It's just about buy, and spend, not really taking into consideration the lives of the people that work in those shopping centers. So there's a lot of, I think, judgment on society as consumers in the collection.
I think there's a lot of stimulus to discuss, really, isn't it? I mean, like Zimmerland, it's a way of asking the question that you said, Jackie, about why do a certain group, I presume, of Americans feel they have to act in this way? Because although they're not actually allowed to go out and do that in a make-believe situation now, like you said, we could easily imagine that there would be people who would. And okay, and I think it's about why do they feel they've got to be always acting big and tough and fighting something and protecting their children for something, because that's sort of reflected in the first story as well, isn't it? That a real American is allowed to protect his family. And Zimmerland's a little bit the same at the end, isn't it? When he's saying the boy to get behind me. I reread it yesterday.
Which is an interesting point that you're making, Katrina, because I mean, bringing in the whole kind of patriarchy, aren't you? Because you're saying about him. Why is it always white men that have to have these guns, shoot, be the protector? You know, why is it always the white man? But also in Zimmerland, I love the way in which the relationship, you know, he didn't just leave that. He actually took it and ran with it. The relationship between the guy and the way in which he was conflicted about working in Zimmerland, getting a good wage, because I think it's hard for him to get a job, but at the same time feeling as if he's compromising his integrity and even his racial position. Plus, on top of that, he then layered the fact that his girlfriend, she's compromised as well. She's complicit as well. And on top of that, again, his girlfriend is then going out with his boss, who is a white man. So there are just so many levels within levels. It's like pain upon pain.
It was. Everyone frustrated me. I just kept getting so annoyed and frustrated with Isaiah. I just kept thinking, maybe it was difficult for him to get a job. I don't know, but he made out as if that's the only job in the whole state or the whole town, because he kept saying it's a secure job. I was like, oh no, working in the supermarket is also quite a secure job. I don't know why he felt like he had no other choice. And then at the end, when they announced they were introducing, like, are going to allow children to come in, and him and his colleague Saleh said, we felt that we were doing good. But then he also knew he wasn't, because when he went to the creative team meeting, he pointed out the fact that most of the patrons opt to kill. I think, killing is the easiest option. And also that suit that they all wear, which isn't realistic. No boy's gonna be walking. Like I just didn't understand him. I don't know. Maybe he was put in a difficult position, but I just felt like he should have had a bit more integrity.
You have to give the brother a break. It's hard.
I can't.
So I mean, the book is a very uncomfortable read, but I think it's a book that we should all read to confront our prejudices. And so, just to conclude, then, what would you rate the book out of 5, and would you recommend it to somebody else?
I hate the book, but I do love it then. I just have very strong feelings about the book.
That's a sign of a good book.
But it wasn't a pleasant read.
Well, yes, it's very uncomfortable. But
I know we probably haven't got time for question 1, which was mine now, but when you said it wasn't a comfortable read, actually I felt like the first story was very difficult, and it made you on edge for the rest of the book. But the rest of the book, actually, I didn't, none of the other stories affected me as much.
Oh.
So I don't know whether that's because you're already in shock, or whether it just made the rest of the stories to me were just a bit like weird, interesting, made you think. Some of them funny. I actually think Friday Black's quite funny, but the first story is shocking, and so I don't know.
Wasn't the last story just as shocking though?
That was very shocking. It's violent.
I mean, the violence. There's a lot of violence in that book. Sorry, in that story.
Yes, but well, I haven't reread it. But
this is
it's kind of because it's on a loop. Because it's on a loop, I think it makes it different.
Also, because it's so far in the future, in some ways, I can suspend my disbelief. And just think, okay, this is not really something that's going to happen. But it was drenched in blood and extreme violence.
And that's what I thought about the first story, because I had to really think, why did I find it so shocking? And I think it's because you just feel like it should be an exaggeration. But is it an exaggeration? You know, you can almost, in the world, the things you hear about in the world, you think, how exaggerated is it? And I think that's why it's shocking.
And also the whole idea of dialing up your blackness or dialing it down according to the circumstance. I felt that was just so spot on. It just made me laugh. It was funny.
I like that part.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know. I think we could have a long conversation about that.
And we don't have time for a long conversation.
Exactly.
on that one.
So, but also there was an element of sadness in some of them, like the one Light Spitter. The young man, he feels as if he's alienated and he's just hopeless, and the only way in which people can remember him is by him doing a really bad thing. In the same way that Lark Street, I felt that was full of sadness as well, and weakness on the part of the man.
Even era as well. There was quite a lot of sadness in the era where you couldn't be yourself. People were described as, ugly and hard. And normal people, well, what we call normal people, we are seen as the other. So I think, and you needed to basically take medicine to feel good about yourself. So I thought that was quite sad.
Yeah.
A lot of pathos, which is surprising when you think about it.
So which of the stories would you say, I mean, okay, I know you hated it and they're not exactly the most, fun of stories, but which one would you say stuck out with you the most, and would you recommend the book?
Yeah, I would recommend the book. I read the stories that we've got questions on again yesterday, and I actually enjoyed the book more this time. I think the first time I was too on edge from it, whereas this time I was a bit more. I would recommend it.
Okay, and out of 5, what would you score it?
Oh, definitely a 4.
Okay, how about you, Tayo?
I'd go higher now. I think I've gained a better understanding, and I realised that the strong emotion, even if it's a strong negative emotion, is still a strong emotion, because I kind of connect with it, even though I continue to complain that I don't like it. But in some other ways, I did. I definitely give it a 4.5.
Okay, that's really
And
good.
Lark Street is still my favourite story.
Okay. How about you?
Fickle Sign 5, I still hate it, but I love it, but I hate it.
Annette, what did you think? Which story stuck with you, and would you recommend it? And what's your score?
I'll still give it 5 stars. I would recommend it, but I think I remember saying this before. I'd only recommend it to people that I think will get it, because otherwise I think it's wasted. I don't know. I think you really need to understand it properly, because so I need to give it to people that would get it and kind of learn from it, if that makes sense. I think most of them are good. I think the stories particularly that just focus on consumerism actually really stood out to me. So all the shopping like more ones were the ones that I quite I appreciated. I thought of it in that way, but I think how extreme it was, it did really make me think about just materialism and everything like that. So 5 stars.
Cool. And I think for me, I think the era, that really stuck out for me as a story, because it sort of reminds me of, if we're not careful, this is what society is going to end up in. Or even the last, Through the Flash, because, talking about all these wars and nuclear weapons and so on. So those two kind of stuck with me, because I was thinking about the future and what could happen if we're not careful. I give it a 4-star, but I never give any book a 5. So it's getting a 4. In fact, 4.5. Getting a 4.5 from me. I just really like this book. It draws a lot of emotion from me. It was hard to read, but despite that, I think that it's really well written. The fact that he can come up with all these stories, I dread to think what goes on in his mind. So I really enjoyed it. So I think that is the end of the discussion. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again when we review our next book. And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And don't forget to share. Goodbye.